Training camp is upon us. Oh, how glorious it is. As Brian brought us, the Super Bowl winning scout is there. He is in Oxnard, California. We have practice today. This is amazing. Zach Wolchuk alongside Brian Broaddus. Welcome in to Love of the Star as football is back. Thank you to everybody who filled out our surveys. Hopefully you got a little bit of our merch. I'm rocking the Love of the Star shirt right now. Brian, we've got yours here that we'll get to you as soon as we join you out there in California. But brother, my gosh, things started with a bang yesterday.
Yeah.
The opening pressers. What were your takeaways from what Jerry, Steven, and Shotty had to say?
Well, you know what? I think to me, the first thing that Jerry Jones and Stephen Jones were iterating was that their players are under contract, and that's something that, when we start to talk about hold in, holdouts, things like that, they wanted it to be known that, hey, our guys are under contract. There's certain obligations they have. We negotiate certain deals, and they talked about how important it was to have everybody there on the same page, working together, and leadership was brought up, and I the first thing I thought of when Jerry and Steven started going after Diggs and started going after Parsons was that Brian Schottenheimer is going to be put in a difficult situation right now. And I think there's going to be some good cop, bad cop. That's always something that people talk about, I've been in organizations before where you've had to walk up to the players and say, listen, I don't share front office's expectations or what they're saying about you. I don't think that's accurate. You go up and you almost you have to put your arm around them and say, hey, listen, I'm going to need you. I'm sorry. This is it's part of the business. I understand it's a nasty and poor part of the business, but that's kind of the first thing I thought about. But Jerry and Steven were very adamant about that. They were saying, hey, our guys are under contract. And Jerry was talking about availability and, with Micah Parsons but he could also talk about availability with Dak Prescott. He even went back and thought kind of some hindsight thoughts about, hey, did I sign Diggs too early? Did I sign Steele? Steele caught a stray by not doing anything, other than just just
Yeah.
the contract the way it is. So yeah, I think that it's a very difficult situation for Schottenheimer. It's very difficult for the coaches, and they're going to have to be the ones that go up, put their arm around the player, and say, listen, I understand. I understand what you're trying to do here, but I don't share management's view here. I want you. I want you to get paid. I want you to be, one of our best players. I want you to be that leader. I want you to be everything that we need as a football player for the Dallas Cowboys to help them win games. So yeah, this is a very well, yeah, I tell you what, it was both barrels, and they went after it, and I guarantee you again, it goes back to Stephen Jones, and it goes back to conversations with David Mulugeta and others. Are there those everyday dialogues that we think of when you start to talk about negotiations? And Stephen was adamant about that. Hey, two-way street. I mean, and the Cowboys get painted into a very difficult corner because of the way that contracts generally get done here. I think they would like to negotiate, but a smart agent will not negotiate with these guys. They'll let this thing drag, and then eventually they'll find a way. Like the Cowboys will say, "Okay, we need the player in, and here we go."
I thought it was also interesting, like the order of operations. We got kind of a peek inside how they go about these negotiations. Because
Mhm.
Jane asked a question, and Steven was very quick to respond, like, Jerry doesn't talk to the agents. I do.
No, not at all.
Me
Yeah,
and Adam
yeah,
Pacifica talk to the agents. Jerry doesn't.
right.
Jerry doesn't have time for that stuff. So I think we know now. And for those that have wondered, I think a lot of this isn't. And Jerry alluded to it when he talked about Mike. Bringing it up with Mike McCarthy, and he didn't do a
Mhm.
lot of draft stuff in Green Bay, but he
Mhm.
wants input from everybody, right? And then he's going to go ahead and sign off on it. But it's kind of a collaborative effort. But when it comes to getting these negotiations done, it's clearly Steven and it's clearly Adam Pacifica that are the ones
Oh, no
handling this for the
question.
agents.
Yeah, no question. I mean, I think Adam is actually the lead guy on this. And Steven Stevens brought in at certain times when things need to be kind of talked about, and as far as gone through is like, okay, is this language okay? Are we all right with the number of years? Are we okay with the roster bonuses, signing bonuses, with all that? This is where Steven gets brought in. Adam really is the point man for the Cowboys. And I think there's a lot of times where unfairly Adam Pacifica, gets cast as a villain here. And not a lot of people know about Adam. I've worked with Adam for a long time. I've known Adam for a long time. He's a very diligent, hardworking guy, but he also works for the Joneses. And when you're in these contract negotiations, and you're the point man, if you have the ability to sign off on the deal, it makes it a lot easier. But if you're having to go through other channels to get to the final contract, that could be very difficult. He could say, okay, I would like to do it this way. And then maybe Jerry and Steven and Jones family might have a different idea of how they want to do this, how they want to structure it. So there's times where Adam could appear to be the bad guy here. And again, a lot of people probably don't know about Adam Pacifica, but I think he is. I think he does a solid job with what he has to work with.
Yeah, and with Micah, it's been very clear the word
Yeah.
leadership, and this goes back to the draft, right? They've got an
Hmm.
expectation. We're going to pay you this amount of money. We're going to need to make sure that you're checking every box possible to warrant being the highest paid defensive player in the league. And I think it's great that Mike is there. I'm wondering now we get practice underway. Mike has said and done all the right things. Is this going to be a legit hold in where he is just kind of standing around, or is he
Hmm.
actually going to be part of practice? Brian, I don't think Micah can go through an entire training camp without being part of this thing. I kind of think we're going to see him practice.
I'm kind of in that 70-30 that he's not going to practice, and the 30 being that potentially he can. Um, I don't feel like that what Jerry Jones and Stephen Jones said about him yesterday changes where him and David Mulugeta are right now. I think it's an unfortunate that the player has to hear that. But sometimes in negotiations, you need to hear the tough things. And I think that David Mulugeta was really advising Micah Parsons uh, correctly. He would say, don't practice, don't do this, don't risk. We've seen injuries at practice. We've seen the Sam Williams injury. I've seen we've we've seen other Sean Lee in a mini camp. I mean, you
Mm-hmm.
see injuries in practice. I mean, it's unfortunate part of the game, but if you're out there, just that one misstep could be the difference between you being available and not being available. I think David Mulugeta has probably been pretty clear to Micah Parsons. Listen, as much as you like to be out there and be with your team and try and do all those things, don't step on that field until we got this deal. Don't risk potentially what we have ahead of us just because you want to jump into a one-on-one pass rush drill. Now,
Yeah.
Steven and Jerry will tell you, like, wait a minute now, you're under contract. You're under contract here. You're not, it's not like we're trying to negotiate something that you don't have. You have a contract with us. We picked up your fifth year option. $24 million. That is what we agreed to. We picked that option up. And yeah, Stephen and Jerry absolutely want to see him practice out there while they do this. But
Mm-hmm.
my gut, the 70% of me says I don't think that'll happen. And they could talk about leadership and all that. And Micah talks about it too.
Sure.
But man, I think the toothpaste is already out of the tube, to be honest with you. I mean, there were where was my why all of a sudden do we want to be a leadership guy now when the money's on the line? Why weren't you a leader when Dak Prescott, and I'm giving Dak credit, or yeah, I'm giving guys credit that have come before that have been leaders when their contract when they were in their first or second year of their contracts. You
Yeah.
know, and I fully respect Micah Parsons wanting to go and travel and see the world and not maybe want to be a part of classroom football. I get all that. But now you're kind of talking about this leadership stuff when we're to the point of you getting paid $40 million. It
Right.
probably been easier for the Cowboys when you were making $2 or $3 million your first or second or third year, and then you showed leadership traits, much like
Mhm.
Dak Prescott has.
Yeah, I've thought the same thing. I guess Micah's my understanding of it, at least from his perspective, would be maybe he felt held back because of DeMarcus Lawrence. And Lawrence was kind of the elder statesman in the room,
Mhm.
and he didn't. That's maybe why they butted heads a little bit. And now
Mhm.
that Tank's gone, he feels like, okay, now it's my time. Now
Yeah.
nobody is in my way. I'm able to step up and be that. But you're right, and a lot of people that are kind of, well, where's this leadership stuff? If you've listened to us on 105.3 The Fan and
Mhm.
you've listened to the platforms that we're on, the stuff with Micah behind the scenes we've talked about for 2 years. I
Yeah.
heard whispers this time last year David Mulligeta's agency and the people around him were telling Micah, dude, you've got to start to shape up because they knew these conversations were coming around. And if you're a
Yeah.
pain in the ass, it doesn't matter how good you are. The NFL will move on from you. And you saw, to me, the best version of Micah Parsons, at least public facing, that we've ever seen. And hopefully that goes and continues. I think he's doing all the right things, showing up and being there. We'll see if he ends up practicing. But yeah, the leadership stuff, I am with you. The dig stuff, man, is really this is kind of getting ugly between
Mhm.
both sides. Like, what are our expectations of Diggs this year about him even playing? He's going to start up on pup, but this seems like there's bad blood between him and the organization. Or am I kind of
Mm.
making it too big? I mean, just Jerry's comments. He's got out of his way multiple times now to take shots at Trayvon Diggs.
Well, Jerry is it's he paid a premium for a corner, and Jerry's the one, and I think Jerry's really mad at himself for doing this one. And Diggs and his team asked for an amount that went below market value. They got it, and so it worked out well. Diggs got his money, and the Cowboys thought that they were going to get a potential Pro Bowl corner, a very talented corner, very productive. Finds ways to make plays on the ball. Has his moments where he's not great, but for the most part, pretty damn good.
Mhm.
But this is where I think that Jerry Jones, the frustration level for Jerry Jones is now a very high level because he gave the contract, and that's his own doing, as I just mentioned. Diggs gets hurt, and he's thinking like, okay, unfortunately, I mean, Jerry's had players that have gotten hurt and given contracts before. I mean, we traded for damn Joey Galloway, got hurt the first damn week of the season. So there's our frustrations and things like that. But where Jerry was frustrated is like, okay, last year you did not rehab with the same type of intensity that we needed you to. And
Mm.
we feel like that might have set you back. Well, maybe Diggs was looking at the situation like, man, you guys forced me back in. I wasn't completely healthy and I got hurt again. Maybe that's where a little bit of this trust might be going. But all of a sudden, Jerry's now in situations. I paid you, you didn't rehab with the same intensity that I needed you to, and then you hurt again, and now you're staying away from the organization. Now the frustration level is now on a whole different level. It went from being, okay, we paid you, you need to be better. Okay, you're not trying to be better at all. And so that's, I think, the frustration that Jerry has right now with him and the organization. That listen, the $500,000 that he left on the table has nothing to do with his rehab. It has everything to do with him just coming and showing up and working out. That's
Yeah.
it. I mean, you come in, you check in, you're around 80% of the time. All you have to do is, and that's where whole thing is at. It was something that was negotiated and thrown in as a way to as a way to make sure that like, hey, here's a way to give you some extra money to make the deal look like it's a really, it's a really strong high end deal.
Right.
And he said, no, I'm not interested in hanging out with you guys. And I'm not. And so that's where I think the frustration level is with Jerry right now. That
And
listen,
it
that
made
this is the second year we've had to kind of go through
right.
this.
Yeah, it's frustrating, and it made me think about a lot of the conversations we had during post games, where the
Mhm.
Cowboys haven't gotten the return on the investment with a lot of these second contracts. And it has to do,
Right.
unfortunately, with either play or the injuries. And, he mentioned it's unfortunate they pay Dak, he gets hurt. Diggs, now they've paid him, he's had two massive injuries. So I get that. Like, if you're paying players top of the dollar money, it's like, damn, now you're not available to play for us. It can be very, very frustrating when you're shelling out that amount of money. You are listening to Love the Star podcast. Love the Stars and Audacy podcast. You can find on the Audacy app or wherever you get your podcasts. Another thing that happened when the Cowboys arrived at camp, Brian brought us. Of course, we had Tyler Smith. Tyler Smith asked by the media, what's the expectation? He said Super Bowl. A little bit of pushback, a little bit of back and forth there. Oh, you think? Is that a realistic goal? Yeah, I think it's a realistic goal. Do you not? Do you not think it's a realistic goal?
Hmm.
I like that. I kind of like the chippiness. And I knew immediately people are going to clown Tyler Smith for this. Because, hey, as Cowboy fans, we can all feel what we want if we think this is a championship team or not. The national
Sure.
media, they're going to take that and run with it, and they're going to clown on the Cowboys because they haven't made an NFC championship game in 29 years. Tyler Smith should feel that way. And every
Yeah.
single person that is reporting to training camp and is about to take that practice field should feel that way. If you don't, why the hell are you suiting up and in the building in the first place? It is always championship or bust. The standard is the standard. And I love that Tyler Smith said that. And I kind of love the chippiness in which he went back and forth. I think it was with Deuce on that.
Yeah. I think to me that, there's a certain level of the organization that where you're at. I know in the front office there were days where I knew where our team was, and I knew that we weren't a playoff team, or I knew that when I was in Green Bay and we won the Super Bowl, I knew at the halfway point of the season that we had a team that could compete with Dallas and then also can compete with the 49ers. I knew that. And but I was also a part of some teams in Philadelphia, a team in Philadelphia, and a team the 3 years that I was in Dallas working the front office with in pro personnel. I knew we didn't have good enough personnel, and you want your players to believe. You want everybody to believe, but deep down in your heart, you didn't do a good enough job, and that's the issue. I mean, Tyler Smith goes out there and plays at a Super Bowl level every year. I mean, he plays that way. Does his teammates, does his coaches, does the front office? No, not all the time. So I I admire the way he goes about his job. I admire the way his attitude is about his job. But the reality is, though, there's only going to be one team holding the Lombardi at the end of the year, and everybody else is going to be disappointed in that. But I feel like, though, yeah, I love my players having that attitude. I want, but there's times, like I say, in the front office, man, we didn't do enough. We didn't do what we needed to do. And that part of it is a little bit of and that's why we always ask these questions. I mean, the question was asked yesterday about, do you feel like you did enough? And then Jerry
Mm-hmm.
commented, and the proof is in the pudding, as they like to say, as these games start to play. If you go out and lose games as a front office, you did not do enough, and that's the reality of this. And I think as players, you want to believe that, yes, we absolutely, why not us? As a front office, you want to believe, why not us? As a
Mm-hmm.
fan base, you're like, man, you've got to show me, and I think that's why. I think that's why you mentioned the word clowned. I think that's why that happens sometimes.
Yeah. The other thing that went down last week was the Jaden Blue storyline, which kind of just came out of nowhere.
Mhm.
And this was, did you work with Glenn Stretch Smith at
I
ESPN?
did.
Did you guys cross paths?
I did. I worked with Glenn. Actually, he was at one point, he was in scouting with us. And then another point, he was matter of fact, he started in coaching, and he was like really a coaching assistant, is really what he was. He wasn't a on the field coach, but he worked with, the staff there and all that. Uh, you're probably going to ask me about what I think about Glenn's
Yeah.
comments.
Mm-hmm.
And I've said this on our my YouTube channel, with the Crown Global Media, that my thought about this was, and I talked to a scout about him, about the player. and how he, what the his thoughts were. This was a scout from the outside the Cowboys. But then but my feeling about Glenn Smith is that Glenn probably got this from a college coach, and I don't think he got this from the Dallas Cowboys. I think the Dallas Cowboys know that Blue has had some maturity problems. He's had some problems getting along with the medical staff, with the strength staff. He hasn't always been a great teammate. There's certain, but the people at Texas are very much like, hey, if you're looking for a 25 carry a guy, 25 carry a game or 25 touch guy, you're probably not that guy. He's more of a 15. That's how they felt about him. But there were questions. So I don't think Glenn got this from the Dallas Cowboys. I think he got it from somebody in college football that probably knew the player very, very well.
Yeah, because and then I mean the lazy comment
Yeah.
that wasn't, and I mean I immediately called you. I started trying
Yeah.
to call some of the people at Texas that I've been
Yeah.
able to get some good stuff from over the years, and yeah, the word lazy was not necessarily something, but the
No.
maturity stuff was 100%, and I think there was even a fear at Texas. He had a little bit of a difficult upbringing. I mean, we don't always think about
Oh,
like the
no,
life, the
absolutely.
person
Yeah.
aspect of this. He didn't end up playing his senior year in high school. He sat out. He was going through the COVID period, didn't have a father figure. His
Yeah.
mom's been very, very outspoken and
Right.
involved, certainly was during the recruiting aspect of it. Texas was fearful he would just up and leave if he didn't get enough playing time there. I know about that. But yeah, I think that's great insight from you, because I was like, man, I
Yeah.
mean, he's barely been around the facility. I don't know where this
Yeah.
is really coming from.
No.
But we
Yeah.
had heard
Yeah.
him and Maffa maybe being a little bit behind in terms of possibly the playbook.
See, that's the thing that I worry about the most is that were some of the things in the OTAs and mini camps, we weren't really seeing those guys involved or thrown into it. And one of the things that Brian Schottenheimer, they asked him the question about what are you looking forward to? It's like we throw these guys out there and see how much they've retained. How much have they picked up from the OTAs, the mini camps to this point? And because what's going to happen is they're going to get to a point in time in camp about 2 weeks in, and it's not going to be teaching anymore. It's going to be getting ready to play the Philadelphia Eagles in week one, is what it's going to turn into. And so if you're behind and you don't know the playbook or you don't know your assignments, then you're probably not going to play. But we did not hear a lot about Blue and Maffa, at these OTAs and minicamp practices. But if I could circle back real quick about with
Yeah.
Blue, it's things that the league knew about the player. And you mentioned the upbringing, the difficult one, the no father figure, the maturity stuff. I mean, these are all things that the Cowboys obviously feel that they could work through. I just have a feeling there were a lot of guys in this past draft, Zach, that were red flagged, and Bobby Belt was bringing them up a lot with us, that were red flagged because of character stuff. And you kind of just say, okay, we can get past that. I think there's some character things here. I'm not saying character as far as violence. I'm just
Mhm.
saying things of just, the personality. And I think those things have to change if in fact he's going to have success with the Dallas Cowboys. He's clearly a talented player, but he's really, really going to have to fight some things that have been kind of following him since his days in Texas.
Yeah, and certainly that running back battle. I mean, that's going to be
Mm.
all eyes on that this week as we get ready for it. In terms of the pup, who's starting on that? I mean, the secondary, it just seems like Butler's
Mm.
not going to be starting on pup. Diggs is going to be starting on pup. Ravel as well is not going to be. I think, I don't know if he was on pup or if he was on another list, but
Mm.
Overshown we knew about. But it's going to be like, man, they were working out edge rushers, Brian. I'm just waiting for when are they working out corners? Because they're going to get out here and get
Yeah.
eyes on it. I wonder if they've got enough bodies right now without moving safeties over to have to play some corner.
Yeah, I think, I talked to some people in the front office before we got out here, and again posted on my YouTube channel there about that they were, kicking the tires on some of these edge rushers. It really wasn't anything about, and you remember last year that what they did with Carl Lawson,
Hmm.
that they brought in Carl Lawson early, kind of get an idea of where he was health wise. and then found a way to like bring him in a little bit later in camp. They were working on the contract and stuff like that, trying to make that all work, but they finally got it done. But I think that when you start talking about with Houston was one of the guys, and he's a really a good pass rusher, James Houston, and then Cameron Klein, and Jesse Laquetta were the
Hmm.
guys that they brought in. And talking to somebody in the front office, they said, no, we're just kicking the tires on these guys right now. Nothing. But this time of year, you also want to get your emergency board kind of in good shape, where you want to know, like, and maybe in some of these open practices or these open days where they don't have practice, they will be bringing in guys to work out to make sure that, like, okay, if we have to go to this guy, can we, because it happens really fast in training camp. All of a sudden, they bring you in and they throw you in. You don't have this ramp up period. So you got to make sure that these guys are in some type of shape before you're able to put them out there on the field. And I think that's what they're doing with these edges.
All right, let's slide in to the Dean Julia mailbag as we put a bow on this one. And I know you got to get out there. We're getting ready for practice. Day one, baby. You are listening to the Love of the Star podcast. Love of the Star is an Audacy podcast. You can find it on the Audacy app or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, the Dean Julia mailbag. Zach Wolchuk alongside the Super Bowl winning scout, Brian Broaddus, as the pads will be coming on later this week. It's actually finally here. Football is upon us. Let's look at some of the questions that we've got here from Starlin. Looking at the
Mhm.
roster, what is one position you see that could exceed expectations and another position that could possibly regress, you think, from last year?
Well, maybe the front seven will exceed what we're thinking. Maybe we figure out that, and I don't think it's going to be just about looking at Mozzie Smith and JT and those guys, the defensive tackle. I think all of a sudden we're kind of having these questions about, can the Cowboys play run defense? Can they find a way to be able to go toe to toe with people? And I'm not just talking about Mozzie and Osa. I'm talking about linebackers. I'm talking about edges. I'm talking about safeties. Those guys that play down, hell, the corners even involved in this stuff. Will this front seven exceed our expectations to being a pretty good run defense? And I've told this to everybody that'll listen. Don't focus just on the defensive tackles. Their run defense was suspect last year. If you look at all the areas where they were attacked, whether it was inside, outside, they gave up some big plays, big explosive plays off the edges. And that's not all about defensive tackles. So will this front seven, and with some safety help, will it exceed what we're doing right now? And so that would be the one thing. The position that might actually regress. What about tight end?
Yeah. Mm.
What if
It could,
what if
yeah.
Ferguson isn't really ready? And what if Schoonmaker is just kind of stuck in neutral, and then Span Ford really didn't improve much with catching the football? And I wanted Span Ford to be more of a guy that was able to kind of adjust and handle the passing aspect of the game. He looks okay blocking and moving and stuff. He just doesn't look totally comfortable with his hands catching the football. But this could be a group that we kind of feel like, well, maybe they have a chance to be better because of the better health of Ferguson. But if Ferguson's kind of stuck in neutral, Schoonmaker doesn't make the jump, Span Ford's not comfortable catching the ball. This could be a group that doesn't meet where we think they might be.
Certainly, yeah, that one could be. I'm with you. I think the linebacker group we've talked about, I think that could
Mhm.
exceed our expectations.
Sure.
Safety. I mean, they got a lot of players that can do certain things, but like to me, I could see safety not being as good as maybe some out
Yeah.
there think that it
Sure.
could be. Malik Hooker. Yeah, he's a solid player, smart, super intelligent individual.
Mhm.
But man, I've always thought safety could be upgraded
Sure.
100%, and they got a lot of bodies in there, but maybe that's one that doesn't quite live up to where we think maybe they possibly could get to. Tight end is a fascinating one, and in fact, Greg Bernett asked us, do you think that there is any chance that Schoonmaker can develop to a competitive enough level to take Fergie's place after his contract expires this year?
Yeah, I mean that's the hope, and there was some flashes of good play from Schoonmaker when Ferguson went out, catching the ball, routes, blocking, things were better. Still hasn't really lived up to the second round tab that he was selected at. Um, is there a chance? Absolutely. Is it possible? Sure. But he's got to go out there and do it. He can't go out there and when he has a chance to have good practices, he has got to stay healthy. There's been some times early in his career where he just was not healthy enough. He was dealing with, I think, with foot, ankle. There's things he was dealing with. He just lost very valuable practice time. He needs to have a healthy camp in order to make that jump.
Another question we got in the Dean Julia mailbag. Here is Dean Julia. What positions do you guys feel are the hardest to evaluate early in camp?
Well, the first four practices are going to be helmets and t-shirts. So it's really not going to be, you can get the movement and the athletic ability, but yeah, it's really, really, really hard to evaluate offense and defensive linemen when there's no pads on, but you could get first step quickness, you could get explosiveness, you could get hand placement, but these guys aren't really trying to drive a guy, way off the ball or, into the ground.
Yeah.
They're just trying to like two real good hard steps, stay up, don't fall on the ground. So I always found like the offense and defensive line were really, really hard for me to evaluate until you get into the padded part of practicing. Running backs could be hard too, just because if they're not running through full speed blocking is
Hmm.
another one. It looked like, oh, that hole looked like it opened up, but if there were pads, would a guy be fighting off that block and getting it, so running back could be a little bit difficult too.
The one I think that is the easiest to get fooled by is wide receiver. I
Oh,
think wide
sure.
receiver, that's always the position where like somebody's the Oxnard darling, whether it was
Oh
Noah
yeah.
Brown or Jalen Cropper last year. Like I remember thinking, man, after the first week of camp, holy man, this wide receiver room, it's better than we thought it was. And then
Yeah.
especially this year with how banged up they are at corner, it might be a
Hmm.
tough evaluation because the wide
Yeah.
receivers like Pickens and CD, like these guys should be absolutely crushing it during one-on-ones with some of these corners. I mean, if Kyrie Elam is holding his own, I'm going to feel absolutely great about that.
Hmm.
But wide receiver is an interesting one. We got another question about like Turpin. Why isn't he considered more as the wide receiver three? And that's an interesting one to me. I know Eric's been a big advocate of Kevontae Turpin.
Hmm.
I've always kind of thought you need to use Kevontae Turpin in certain ways. And I think like the quick screen that or the slant, excuse me, on Monday night where they hit him and he takes a big touchdown run to the house against Houston out of the backfield. But to me, he's kind of like a 10 to 15 yard in player. He's not going to
Hmm.
win down the field. And I think
Hmm.
that's a lot of the time when you think of a burner and a guy that's got a lot of speed, well, he should be able to take the top off the defense. He's limited in his size to be able to really attack the football down the field, in my opinion, and he doesn't track it always great. So I think, getting him the ball quick underneath in space, allowing him to use his speed and quickness, that's really the best way, I think, to get the most out of Kevontae Turpin.
Yeah, where he's been super good is putting him in the backfield and handing him the damn ball. There were times in the OTA minicamp practice I got to watch where they had him and Lamb both in the backfield, and they handed him the ball going off the left side a couple of times, and he was 5, 6 yards down the field before the defense even reacted. So yeah, I think to me, I think he has gotten better catching the ball down the field. We've seen some routes, some inside routes where up and curl or little in breaking routes, and they get
Mhm.
him the ball right there. But you're right. Anything down the field where it turns contested, his lack of length and his lack of height is a problem.
All right, last one here because I know you got a busy day, my man, and this is that time of year where hey, the schedule it is go go go.
Mm,
Let's go to 2 weeks with play. Hell of a name
mm.
here on the Twitters. What position group are you going to be most excited and following closely here as camp gets underway?
The obvious one to say is again the front seven because I want to see how that really, really plays out. I'm interested though in the secondary myself though too, and I
Hmm.
and I I make it a point. I try and follow all the positions. I don't just lock in. I know. I'm out here right now with Vach Lombardi, and he and I do our our podcast together and stuff. And Vach says, "I'm going to watch the offensive and defensive linemen." I'm like, "Okay, I'll go down there and watch the secondary and receivers work with each other. We'll get back at the end of the day and talk about what we saw." But you
Mhm.
really, really try and kind of keep an eye on all groups. But I think with, as you mentioned, with all the question marks at the cornerback room, who is stepping up and who is not? Who can they rely on? Because they've got to find bridges to get through the season until they get some of these guys back. I think they're going to get Ravel back at some point in time, but I don't think they're going to get Diggs back. And we'll see what happens with Butler as well. But I kind of feel like that if they get Butler and Ravel practicing, I think it'll look like a much better group. I think Elam and Bland will be your starters. Who will be the nickel? Will be the big question here.
Kalen Carson, man, that one's gonna be
Hey, Kalen
fascinating.
Carson. Yeah, there you go.
Can he bounce
Yeah,
back after year two? But I mean, I'm always going to gravitate towards the offensive line. I'm excited about
sure.
that, especially the middle. Can they live
Mhm.
up to the expectations, the power that they could possibly play with? How's Guyton look? But I think the big question is who's emerging at running back.
Mm.
To get eyes on Williams, Sanders, like do one of those veterans actually step up and say, "Hey, this is my backfield." Blue, Maffa, Lipke. Does Deuce Vaughn
Very good.
actually
Yeah.
have a shot to make the team this year? That
Mhm.
that all is going to fascinate me because I think fans probably, if we were to poll it, like who's going to be the starting running back, I would assume that might be the top question as we get into camp. Any final thoughts here, buddy, as we put a bow on this one?
No, looking forward to them. Like I say, this week of practice is going to be like the helmets and t-shirt type variety of practices. I think you'll see a lot of athletic ability in these practices. I'm interested to see how competitive the practices are. I would love to see a practice like they used to have under the Jason Garrett administration, where they were physical, where you got something out of them, where you could really, really evaluate. So then this weekend we'll get the pads that I believe it's Sunday, Monday situation. We'll go back to back pads there. So yeah, a lot going on. Excited about football starting up again, and trying to get as many of these questions answered as we can until when you and I get to talk again here later on in the week.
You're a beast, brother. Of course, Brian out in Oxnard. We'll be joining him with the G Bag Nation on Sunday. We're going to fly out there. Of course, KNC Masterpiece from 105.3 The Fan out there. But Vach Lombardi with Brian doing all right. Crown Global Media. Make sure you're liking, subscribing, doing all the great stuff there. We love you. And thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for making Love of the Star a part of your day. We're going to be with you throughout the entire season. What a feeling. Football is back. Until next time, hugs and hand pounds, everybody.